This is a Flying Cow production. Moo, 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 moo,
Well, hello and welcome back to the Academy. That's right, the show where we take a look at films from a certain year and decide what we believe is actually the best picture, because as we all know, the Academy gets it wrong all the time. Or, you know, the Oscars, they get it wrong. We don't. But I, of course, am your host, Clay Johnson, the Flying Cow himself. And here with me today is my regular co-host for this show. We have the chart master, Hannah Kiefer, and the good boy, Lord Jack Allison. How are you both?
I'm doing great. I haven't cut my toenails in like a couple months, and so I'm pleased to say that I'm now a size 12 shoe.
Oh, that's interesting.
It's pretty great. I've wanted to be that size for a long time.
If you keep going and they just curl underneath, you might not even need shoes.
I know, it's like platforms.
Yeah.
Well, you know, let me know. I might have some size 11 to 11 and a half Nikes I can sell you.
I'll tear them apart. I'll tear them apart, man. It's going crazy right now. But I appreciate it.
All right. So we are here, of course. We've been talking this season, I guess, about the films of 1930. We chose 15 films and decided to watch them. We've done one group of 5 at a time, and we are at the final group of 5. Talking about some different films. And Jack did this last time, and I think it's actually a good idea. What did you guys think overall about this group compared to our last couple of groups?
This is probably my favorite grouping of films that we've had. I know we talked last week about how it was indifferent to most of the ones from last week. And then the week before I had a couple that I liked, but I really solidly, really enjoy 4 of these. And that's a much higher ratio that I have. So, and as you announced last time what they were going to be, I was like, oh yeah, I forgot we were going to get to talk about that one. So this is my favorite batch of the bunch.
Yeah, maybe a little bit different. I had an easier time ranking these than by far the last 2 rounds.
Sure.
Overall, I like these. These were a lot more grounded stories, I guess, than like a lot of the more abstract stuff that we've had from the previous couple episodes. Definitely had some flaws with, I think, pretty much one of each thing that we had. We'll discuss, of course, but overall, I was pretty pleasantly surprised by a lot of these.
It's a lot of like, it's we have a theme running, and all the ones that kept that theme I really liked, apparently. And the theme is basically how women should behave, good women, bad women, that kind of thing.
And birds in cages.
We have a lot of those.
No women, or very few. And I was like,
as well as birds in cages.
I will say I definitely liked this group better than the last one. I won't necessarily say that this was my favorite grouping, but it was a pretty strong grouping. There really wasn't any film in this group that I just disliked. There were some that hit me harder, or, you know, I appreciated more or understood a little bit more. But overall, I just enjoyed this grouping better. But just to go ahead and get into this, we are, like I said, we're talking about 5 films today. We're going to be talking about The Blue Angel, City Girl, Hell's Angels, Madam Satan, and The Big House. So we are going to go ahead and we are going to start off with the first film in this, which is the Marlene Dietrich. We've got another Marlene Dietrich film here, and this film includes Marlene Dietrich, but I wouldn't necessarily call it a Marlene Dietrich vehicle as much as the last one. But yes, Marlene Dietrich film, The Blue Angel. And we're going to go ahead as usual and share some trailers. I will say this trailer actually is mostly in German, and with some placards in between. I will read those, but other than that, you guys just enjoy the German. I would say this is one that I would hope people might watch the video, because this trailer I actually really enjoy. And if not, look it up on YouTube. It's pretty easy to find. So yes, this is Marlene Dietrich's The Blue Angel. A respected professor. A seductive singer.
Also, Künstlerin Lola Lola. Sie verführen meine Schüler.
Großgerechnet. Na? Nun sagen Sie gar nicht mehr. Eigentlich sind Sie ganz hübsch.
A dangerous obsession.
Kann der Mann nicht verstehen. Aber wie kann man seine ganze Zukunft gefährden wegen einer solchen Person?
A modern tragedy and an erotic masterpiece.
Sie war wie ein Funksund. Es Leben. Es handelt sich unseren beliebten Professor Emanuel Rath.
The Blue Angel. Filmed by Joseph
That last shot makes this look like a horror film.
All right. So yes, that is The Blue Angel. That is the film we are discussing today. And I believe, Hannah, you are introducing this film, correct?
I am. So The Blue Angel is obviously from 1930. It's a German musical drama film. It was filmed actually simultaneously in German and English language versions. As we talk, you'll find I watched only the German, Jack watched only the English, and Clay watched both. Mm-hmm. And so we have a good perspective here. Yep. But it was directed by Joseph von Sternberg, who we have seen already in the Academy. He actually directed our other Marlene Dietrich movie, Morocco. Yeah. And this one stars primarily Emil Jannings and Marlene Dietrich, with a supporting cast of Kurt Gehren, Rosa Valetti, Hans Albers, Reinhold Berndt, Edward von Winterstein, and more. So the premise is it's about a professor who is widely disrespected by his students, and he ends up falling in love with a dancer at a club and marrying her, and his whole life kind of falls apart. And it was really, really well received. It was, I did find that this was the first feature-length German sound film, which is pretty cool. And it is definitely considered a German cinema classic. I'll start off with my thoughts on the movie, if that works. Sure. Yeah. I really like this one. I think this is a really, really interesting story. And I think that there are ways in which it could be very easily... It dances right along. As I said, this whole section is kind of a lot of women behaving badly stories. Yeah. And this absolutely feels like it could be just a very typical story. But having watched 1930 and seeing so many women behaving badly stories, because that's like the prime genre of 1930. Yeah. This one definitely is a lot more interesting. I really like Marlene Dietrich in this. I really like Mila Jannings in this. Kind of watching him like try to hold on to the pieces of who he was, but also being like completely unable to stand up for himself and what he actually like his own sense of dignity, just kind of having to go along with whatever is being told to him to do. I really, really like. There's I think the thing that really sold it for me was that there are some musical numbers in this, but there's primarily one that's repeated twice. One at the beginning of the movie when Marlene Dietrich is first singing and he's falling in love with her.
It's the one that was in the trailer.
Yes. And it became like a big song in German, like just a regular song.
I will say what I really like about that is that each time we see it performed, it's kind of like Remember Me and Coco. It's being performed differently.
Absolutely. That's what I
based
love.
on where it comes in the film.
Yeah, we have especially these two contrasts where one in the beginning where it's like it's sweet and it's lovely and he's like, oh, she's singing about me. And then the second time it's very ominous. And because she's falling in love with someone else. She's not even falling in love. She's just pursuing someone else and he feels like he's losing her and he's losing everything and he's sacrificed his whole life for her and now she's leaving him. And so I love how simply they take this one song and give it so many different meanings and different vibes with just within that. I think the performances in this are really interesting. I am curious to hear about for folks who watch the English language one, because I again only watched the German and I don't know how that differed and how that came across differently. Although I'm assuming it was basically the same script and same shots and everything. It was just if it was shot simultaneously.
Pretty much tells the same story.
Right.
For the
Okay.
most part. How much of it you understand is
depending on the subtitles, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, so I really enjoyed this one. I was curious going into it how y'all would feel about it, if it would feel too I absolutely 100% prefer it to Morocco or other von Sternberg, Marlene Dietrich one we saw this year. I think she's more interesting in it, and I think the story itself this is a lot more interesting.
The supporting cast around her is definitely stronger. I will say I kind of prefer the fact that we get more Marlene Dietrich in that one. I like it kind of being a Marlene Dietrich vehicle, and also I don't ever feel bad about her choices, where in this one it's a lot more gray. I will say, you mentioned the women behaving badly genre, and I think there's a couple different ways of framing that. Whereas some of them are just kind of present like it's women just kind of feeling themselves and enjoying themselves, whereas others it's like this is bad. Women shouldn't be like that, and it's very judgmental. So there's a couple different tacks. I think this one kind of does a little bit of both. So it's interesting. I will say as you guys mentioned, watched both the English version and the German. And I will say I'm glad that I watched the German. I actually watched the German last night, and it went from my the bottom of my list to much higher. There are definitely part of it is that the English version, although good bits of it are in English, there are also still big bits that are just in German, and the version that I had no subtitles. So I was basically just guessing as to what they were talking about. And I will say I had a basic idea, but there's so much nuance that you miss based on like, number one, I mean, she's not in it for very much, but in the German version, the maid actually has a character. Whereas in the English version, it's basically just this woman that just throws away a bird and that's it. And so it like I said, it adds layers. I will say the thing that I most kind of struggle with is that I ultimately feel like the theme that the film is saying is that this guy's life was ruined by this woman seducing him. And I don't really feel like that's really what happened.
No,
because,
I feel like,
I mean, what I would have preferred would have been for them to more like make it obvious that she feels affection towards him, but I think it was a mistake for her to accept his hand in marriage, or to accept marriage.
Done that.
I think what she should have done is just being like, oh, I'm fond of you, but you don't want to be married to me. And him just pursue her anyway. And so basically he's hoisted based on his own decisions, not based on, well, she led him on. She lied to him. She, this, that, or the other.
Well, she does reject him at first. She's like, no. She's like, this is not something that you're interested in.
She laughs at him and then accepts it.
I guess, I guess that's true. I thought there was a little bit more in between, but
I said, I feel like the way Marlene Dietrich is playing the character, that's what I really get from it. That she's just being herself. This guy is, seeing things through his own lens of propriety. That is one thing that I like, is he's a very proper person, and he thinks that if people act outside of what is acceptable, then they're bad. And he basically tries to fit her in his little box. She doesn't fit, and he gets mad. But ultimately, I would have liked it to be, it's not her fault that she didn't fit in his box.
Well, I think it actually does and rewatching it, I wasn't sure if I was going to feel more of that, but I think it actually does a pretty good job. Like, I really liked we kind of see things, and then I guess we can let Jack show what he wants to.
Sorry.
But I was really struck this time by the scene right after they're married, where they're on the road and he's trying to sell the little pictures of her, and then he comes back and is just like miserable, and she's
because
like,
it happens immediately after a scene where he says, we will not sell those pictures as long as I have a penny to my name.
And so he comes back and is just like,
he's selling pictures.
Yeah. And because, you do what you got to do to survive. It's clearly that they're not in a good place. And so, but he comes back and is like, oh, those stupid people out there don't know what they're missing. And she's at that point, you can see that you can get the sense right away that he's like been miserable and been unhappy the whole time. And she has that
transition.
And so she's like, there's no point in you calling that. We make our living off of them. Like, this is the life that we have. You have to be willing to give something to the audience. And so I think right there, even then, like, she hasn't done anything wrong at that point. She's just continued to live her life and to do her job the way that she knows to do her job. And when he's like, we're not going to sell these, she's like, no, that's my job. We're going to do this. And he's clearly unhappy with it. And she's like, well, I'm just going to keep going. And so it does make me wonder that if he had been more willing to go along with it, more like that, this is the life that I married into. This is the life that we're going to do. And we're either going to do it the way that makes money, or I need to figure out something else for myself. And so I wonder a little bit if there had been a little bit more actual support of that going along, if the ending would have been different, if it would have been a different situation.
I actually prefer, because obviously he gets into something, when he basically reveals that he's going to marry this woman after, meeting her twice.
Yeah.
He loses his job. I mean, I will say in the English version, it straight up says, well, then I'm sorry, you're done. In so many words. Whereas in the German, it's basically just like, I'm going to have to report this. So it's like, he's probably going to lose his job. Whereas in the English version, I remember it being much more firm. Like you're done. So, I think that is part of why he makes the decision that he does. But I honestly don't think that he realizes the life that he's put himself in for, that he's not ready for.
No, absolutely not.
Which is honestly what really causes the problems and the decline, is that he's in a world that is not his.
No.
And that he's not willing to acclimate to.
Yeah.
Yeah. But Jack, we've talked enough about
we've
this.
fought back and forth about this.
There's been plenty of reasons why I've been pretty quiet, because like I said earlier, like I only watched one version. I picked the worst movie of our 5 to watch last, because I've been very strapped for time on my schedule, so I only had the time to watch this one time, and it happened to be the English version. Because as you two, as Clay said, it cuts out a lot.
The German is so much better. And much better.
I'll rewatch the German. I'll watch the German version before our final ranking episode. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, to to kind of spill the beans, this movie is ranked at the bottom of my list, not necessarily because it's far and away the worst compared to everything else that we've seen, but just because it feels it would be unfair to put this above anything else on our list, because I basically watching the German version, watching the English version with so much German that's untranslated in the film feels like a jigsaw puzzle bought for thrift store.
It's like
you just don't have all the pieces.
Yeah, I was about to say, like I said, it
That's fair.
was before last night. It was my bottom as well.
Now, Clay, were you saying that that you felt the maid character was more fleshed out in the
there was
German
more
version?
to her
In the German version?
I mean, there's not more scenes with her, but like she's just saying a bunch of stuff in German, and you're just like, okay, like you can get a little bit of her attitude, but in the German version, it's like, okay, this woman is like, this dude annoys her. She thinks that he's, you know, a little too big for his britches, kind of thing.
Yeah.
I think had she seen his downfall, she would have thought, well, you deserved that.
Yeah.
Cheering at the club on the last night.
Yeah. Like she
wasn't there, but she could have been.
Yeah, she definitely is a person of lower status that looks down on her employers.
Well, and I think that's part of the thing that we see at the beginning is that, like, and looking it up, it sounds like this was even it was based on a novel, and it sounds like this was even more fleshed out in the novel, that he starts off like not a respected person. Like his students are not great with him.
His students make fun of him.
His landlady,
they keep
maid
calling
doesn't
him,
like him.
Professor Garbage, which I believe his name is Wrath in this, and I believe Unrat is the name is the word for garbage.
Yeah.
So they keep, because you're right. It's based on a so I believe the novel translates as Professor Filth.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting that he, in his head, that he has so far to fall, but from what we actually see of his life, like, he actually might be in better position, like if he's getting these big name, getting to play at these big clubs, and he's playing the sidekick character to this magician. Like, but in his head, it's such a far fall. Yeah. And so that's really fascinating to me. That like in his head, he's like the super. So in his head, he's super proper and super respected, and we see he is not respected, nor does he really hold those high standards, because again, he immediately decides to marry Marlene Dietrich just based on
I was
going to
say condemns the boys for going to this club, and then falls in love with Marlene Dietrich at the club.
So he has neither the respect nor the moral standards that he thinks he has, because he sacrifices them in an instant for when he wants it. And so he has this opinion of himself that in a way it's about him kind of realizing almost that he almost stays almost level in terms of how much people respect him throughout, but in his head it's like
I will say, I want to join you, Hannah. I didn't say this before, in acknowledging Emil Janning's performance, because he's phenomenal.
He's so
good. He really is. Honestly, like I told you guys, finding the trailer for this is what made me want to rewatch the German, because I was like watching that trailer. I was like, okay, this looks like a movie I need to watch. And I already have and didn't get this out of it.
I clearly didn't watch this one. Yeah.
Right. There are, I will say his performance is pretty much the same. The things that I haven't mentioned that are definitely different in how they bring the English in is that in his classes, he insists on them using English. So he teaches them in English. And when he goes and he meets Marlene Dietrich, in that version, Marlene Dietrich plays it like she's British, which is interesting. I mean, it's not a great accent, but you can tell occasionally, oh, she's trying to be British. This is weird, but they speak together in English, whereas everybody else speaks in German. So
it's like that's really interesting.
Yeah, it's an interesting take. I mean, I will say that doesn't take away from anything. It adds a slightly different perspective to it, but it doesn't change a whole lot. What I will say is different. Like I said, Emil Janning's performance I think is great in both. I felt it more in the German version because I didn't feel like I was missing so much. When he breaks into the rooster crow at the end. Like that's, yeah, that is just, it really breaks you.
It is a heartbreaking moment.
Yeah,
like
it really is.
I had forgotten just how devastating that moment is.
And it really is, because he's basically having a nervous breakdown on stage.
Mhm.
Not only because, he's, like you said, he was never really respected, but it's kind of being thrown in his face how little respect he has. And at the same time knows that his wife is cheating.
Yeah, he's not discovering a drawing this time. He's hearing it. He's being told to his face that, you suck.
Yeah. And he's got nothing left for himself.
It destroys him. He has no self-respect, and it's just it's so tragic. But something else that I don't think reads in the English language version, and honestly, I almost said this in Morocco. When she sings in English, Marlene Dietrich's voice does not work.
Interesting.
But in German, it actually is fine. In German, somehow, because of the tones and everything, it works. Now, am I saying that she's an amazing singer? No. But for this type of film, for these types of songs, for these like lounge, it works. But when she sings in English, something just doesn't come through. And I wrote down, I was like, I don't know why they keep having her sing. She doesn't sing great. And then I saw this version and I was like, oh, now I know why. Because in German, it works.
Watching Blue Angel, having seen both Morocco and Blue Angel within my 1930 project, and I think I watched them pretty quickly within each other. Watching, I'd never been a huge Marlene Dietrich fan. I hadn't seen a lot of stuff with her. And watching Morocco, I was like, nope, still don't get it. And then I watched Blue Angel and was like, I get this a little more. Like, I get why, I get the draw of like thinking of being like, we need to bring this to the US. And I think it makes sense of that. I think we're seeing her there in like full star power as a German actress and in her wheelhouse. And it took a little while sometimes for her to find her footing and how to deliver the same thing in American English. Yeah.
With her, I agree. The singing in the version that I saw it didn't blow me out of the water. But first of all, correct me if I'm wrong. Was Morocco or another film on our list, did it have the same song that she sings twice in this film, or what? Am I going crazy? Because it seems so familiar to me.
Again?
Yeah,
that's a good question.
I swear I've heard that recently. I can only assume it's from one of our
it is her
films.
Signature song.
Yeah,
apparently.
Okay. I need to rewatch Morocco then, apparently, because I swear I feel like I've heard her sing the song before I saw this movie, and I haven't seen this film before.
You might have, like, it might have been the kind of thing where like she just performed it everywhere.
Okay.
So, but that is definitely a thing that I could see.
But as far as her character in this film goes, I liked her character, I think, more in Morocco because it felt like it had more complexity to it.
Oh, for sure.
Whereas in this film, I get it doesn't have to be. It's more so to represent like the corruptive contrast, the chaotic contrast, for lack of for better put, I guess, chaotic to his very structured lifestyle. And that's supposed to kind of bring him into his madness. And I think his performance is great, even from the version that I saw, because while his descent into madness feels a little bit more like a light switch being flipped than a gradual descent to me, I felt like he portrayed that switch very well, because he does hit a very distinct breaking point in the story where it's like, okay, of course he's going to go nuts and start making chicken sounds. I think, Clay, you brought up boxes earlier. I think my biggest take from the version that I saw of this was the idea of him seeking to categorize.
Categorize. Yeah.
Categorize.
We'll say it.
Thank you. Because the movie starts out with him having his structured lifestyle. He meets the lounge singer as a teacher. He tries to kind of put her into his own box to control, as you said, Clay. I think it transitions from him marrying her, being out of his job, to where he finds himself being put into her box because he has no other where to go. It's like, hey, I married you. I'm also unemployed. Can you get me a job? It's like, no, now she's in control. Now she's taking over his life. And I think what leads him to his to where it climaxes for his, well, not his climax, the ending, the resolution to his character is he finds himself back in the place, realizing like that he never even had his own box to put himself in properly. Because as you said from the very beginning, he's not respected, he's not taken seriously by either his colleagues or his students. He's not even given a second chance or even a chance to explain himself once the principal comes in. So he hadn't even taken the time to organize his own life before trying to take over someone else's, and then finding himself easily manipulated by that person because they're more authority than him. With students, it's like, all right, you look at him in the beginning of the film, he's going out of his way so much to be like, I mean, I don't know what the teacher student dynamic was back then, but the fact that like you have an educator who's going to these nightclubs on their own volition in their own off time to hunt down these students. It's
there's something about the fact that he goes to her and is like, you need to stop letting my students. I was like, you need to calm down.
And he's fucking going backstage too. It's like, all right, where are these kids?
What undoes him is his own propriety, his own sense of what is decent.
Well,
but not recognizing that he's put it in the wrong place.
I think it has something to do with his high opinion of himself as well. Like it never occurs to him that maybe I'm not that great a teacher. It's like clearly this outside force is corrupting my students and making them incapable to correctly pronounce the English word the.
How do I reach these kids when it should be how do I reach this educator first?
Yeah.
I will say another thing that I noticed on second watch that I really didn't on the first one is, he kind of goes through these phases. He starts off, as the professor, and like we said, at least respected in his own mind, and then as he gets married to her, and then slowly transitions as he runs out of money, and he starts selling the postcards, and then eventually he becomes a clown and is basically, at least in his mind, they keep building it up like this is now you're a star, but he just sees himself as the butt of the joke. What I find very interesting is that when he first joins them at the Blue Angel, there's another sad clown figure that is there in the background that basically disappears after he joins.
He took his job.
I think you see him again. I may be mistaken. Do you see another actor without makeup on that looks very distinctly similar to that person?
Could be. On. I will say I just don't really remember distinctly see. So yeah, like you said, he kind of takes that guy's. I also wondered, I was like, are we showing that this is like a trend? That not necessarily with Marlene, because I don't think that guy was with Marlene Dietrich's character, but maybe he was there like tagging along with one of the other performers. And now as this guy comes in, that guy kind of cycles out.
It reminded me of the themes behind Nightmare Alley. Okay. The 40s and the Guillermo del Toro film that recently came out with the idea of the geeks phasing out one another, from like prominence and importance to degradation through the corrupt morality of that lifestyle.
And his part is it is to be the butt of the joke and the person who the magician is doing all the tricks around. So like it absolutely could be the one that is the entry level for people who like want to perform but don't actually have talent or who are just like, I'll perform for very cheap, and they're like, sure, come on in. And so I could see
but there is a difference in perspective with that too. You can see yourself as the butt of the joke, or you can see it as a way to, well, let's get started here. And I might be the butt of the joke, but I'm going to entertain to a level that you want to see.
Or you can claim it all the way. Like you could do like a you can do you can own it. What's her face? From the leading lady of all the Marx Brothers movies, who was always being the butt of the joke to Groucho. But that was her shtick, and that was the thing that she was. This is my job. This is what I do, and you can do that very well. And so you can claim that. And but then when he had to go back and see that in the town where he was from, where in his head he was this highly respected figure, and then to see everybody come out there just for the purpose of watching him and laughing at him was not what he could handle.
And we also mentioned the idea of the phasing out of different roles within that the class structure of the circus. Oh, not the circus. You know what I mean? The nightclub.
The nightclub acts.
you also look at the introduction of the magician character, which is especially interesting because he's introduced as the professor. He's like, oh, well, you're a real professor. I'm just, the magician character. He treats him with respect at first.
Yeah.
And then he basically becomes his boss. And he's like, he's the new professor. And so like, it's not only that he's become the clown, but he's also looking at someone who's basically taking over his job, like by title. So there's a lot there.
This is only tangentially related, but as I was looking stuff up on Wikipedia for this, I did find the very sad fact that the actor who played the magician was a German Jewish actor who then was killed shortly later in one of the concentration camps. So that was, I was like, oh, that's a,
yeah, that's,
I mean, and that's, when you're in German films in the 1930s, you're right in between some nasty stuff.
Yeah. Kurt Garen was his name.
Yeah.
It is interesting too, just like as a side note of that, just with all these films, particularly focused on war. It's like, I feel like a lot of us nowadays, when we think of war films, like one of our immediate goes to is like Vietnam or World War II, but like they only had one great war at this point in history. And so it's like, it's like these people who making these films about how horrible war is. It's like, they don't even know what's coming.
Yeah. And they like, get ready for a whole century of them.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
on that happy note.
Is there anything else that anybody wants to say about this film before we move on?
Like I said, I'll watch it again, the other version, before we have our final episode. I promise.
I'm very curious to see if your thoughts change, and how seeing the full picture, or being able to read the full picture and see everything.
I think it's overall a good. I think it's overall a good film that I saw. The film that I saw. It's just like I said, I just can't rank it higher than I did just because it feels insincere because I haven't seen the full picture.
Yeah.
So.
All right. Well, then let us go ahead and let us move forward to the second film that we are going to be discussing today, which is the silent film City Girl. This is just a lot of instrumental for our podcast listeners, so I'm going to go ahead and phase this out.
Can I say something really quickly before you go into it?
What's that?
I just want to say the folks for listening who haven't seen the film, the music in the movie we watch is way better than that.
Way better.
It's nothing
way
like
better
that.
than that. No.
Crap MIDI track.
Honestly, that was the first thing that I wrote down for this film, was that how much I loved the soundtrack.
Oh, it was lovely.
Because it goes along perfectly with the movie. So good.
I had to call it the bad trailer.
Yeah.
That's rough.
Basically, we just played an unrelated piece of instrumental music that gives you no sense of the movie.
And that title card, like the black and white City Girl, I'm like, who did that?
Yeah. But yeah, I will say again, that was if you watch it, a pretty decent trailer aside from, the music isn't the best. But yeah, so this is City Girl. Directed by F.W. Murnau. And let's see, the music that we all loved was by Arthur Kay. And it starred Mary Duncan and Charles Farrell. They list it the opposite way, but I'm listing Mary Duncan first because I loved her in this movie.
She's the titular City Girl.
Yeah, she was phenomenal. Whereas his character, Lem, I wrote down several times, Lem's an idiot.
I love him so much.
I mean,
he's a lovable idiot.
I was about to say,
very lovable idiot.
I will say, just
he's a farm boy.
Be out front. This is my number one. I really enjoyed this film, and it's the only silent film on this list. And I just was assuming that it was going to come like at the most second or third or something like that, just because sometimes silent films can be a little harder to get into. But this one, honestly, the moment we met Mary Duncan as Kate, I was on board. I was
that opening shot.
love
She's
Kate.
charismatic.
She's so good. I wrote down, I was like, she reminds me of Jean Arthur. If you've ever seen Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, she has that very like, oh, you're sweet, you're cute, but you're also out of your depth kind of thing. She kind of has that towards the character of Lem. And even though I think that he makes some really dumb decisions, I'm on board for their love story. I find them cute and sweet, and I root for them, even though, like I said, sometimes he makes some decisions that I'm like, really, dude? Really? But yeah, I just to kind of give, basically, this is about a young man during kind of as the Depression is going on, is sent to the big city by his father to sell their wheat,
which is
in
nice
order
to see addressed.
The
Depression.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, it just kind of shows how life was during that time.
Yeah.
And, he is sent by his father to sell wheat. And while he's there, he meets a woman who is a server in a diner. Kate, as I said, played by Mary Duncan, who is just cute and sweet, and basically she sees in him a sweetness and a life that she wants outside of this kind of depressing, oppressive city. And he takes her home. They get married after only meeting 3 times. 2 films in a row, we have marriages that happen very quickly, although this one I'm much more on board for. But they get married very quickly, and he takes her home expecting, Ma and Pa to be all excited. And Pa is not, number one, because he didn't sell the wheat for as much as he thought he should, which honestly, I mean, I get, especially during that time, every cent counts, but the discrepancy was not as big as I was thinking it was going to be. I believe like he expected to get 29,000 and it was only 28. Like I was expecting, it's only like 14 or 15, but no, it's just like a little bit less. But
I was expecting magic beans.
But also, he just assumes that this girl from the city is trying to, bewitch his son and take whatever they have. She is not like that. She's very much, a pull yourself up by your own bootstraps and work for what you have, and that kind of person. She's a very practical, pragmatic person. And basically the remaining conflict all floats from the conflict between, the father and Kate, which then spills over into the relationship. But yeah, I just really enjoyed this film. Like I said, I liked the relationship set up. It meant something when they then put obstacles in front of it. I was rooting for it to come through the whole time. And like I said, Mary Duncan as Kate is just phenomenal. And I will say I looked her up. I don't think she did much. Yes, I think she retired from acting just 3 years after this. So she didn't have a very long career. It was only from 27 to 33. But I mean, if this performance is any representation of the rest of her work, I would like to see more. I think she was phenomenal.
I think I remembered liking it. This is one of the very, very first ones I watched from a 1930 project. So I watched it like 2.5 years ago or something.
Sure.
And then I went back and rewatched it. And the opening shots are just absolutely perfect because it's like the perfect rom-com opening because it's them both on the train, they're sitting across from each other, and we come to Lem, and the conductor is like, all right, give me your ticket, and he pulls out his wallet and is pulling out like paper after paper after paper trying to find this one. So and me very worried about it, like, oh my gosh.
Sorry, I'm going to correct you real quick. You said they were on the train. It was a different girl that was on the train with him.
Was it?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah, because that girl was after his money. That girl was after his money. Whereas
okay,
Kate
cool. Jack and I both thought it was the same person.
Yeah.
So never mind. Ignore everything I said.
I think that scene, number one, I think it's very important to understand that they're not the same girl, because that girl is the guy is the girl his father is afraid she is.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, there we go. I just thought that they had met initially, and she had been trying to flirt with him, and he was like, "Nope, bye."
Yeah.
No, she was straight up after his money, because she was just like ho hum. She sees him pull out that money, and then she's like, "Hey," and then he can't flirt, and she loses interest. Yeah.
Well, there we go. Never mind.
Watch it with that in context.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it wasn't a huge. I just really liked.
I will say
now I'm like, oh well, never mind.
Yeah. At first, I was like, is that the same girl? And then as I saw them interact, I realized, oh no, completely different girl.
I thought it was just, that she was set up at the beginning. Like the girl at the beginning was clearly so like tired and exhausted and was like not interested in things. Was trying to strike up a conversation and then kind of got awkwardly shut down. And so I thought later when we saw her later, I was like, oh, she's like she thinks she has more of a chance to talk to him and maybe he'll be friendlier this time.
Yeah, no,
no, that makes sense.
The girl on the train was played by Helen Lynch.
Oh, I thought that was
similar.
her.
And she's credited as girl on the train or girl on train. So yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
All right, well, I still like the movie.
I was going to say, honestly, I feel like that. It sounds like you guys didn't get the fact that girl was just into him for the money.
No, yeah. I thought it was just I didn't know that it was money that he was pulling out of his that he had.
Yeah,
like I thought it was just
she was,
papers.
as you said, bored, and then he pulled out his money, and then that's when she decided to flirt with him.
No,
and I did not catch that he had pulled out money, and so I thought she was just flirting with him. Okay, well there we go.
My headcanon was that it helped explain like why she takes interest in him at first, whereas like he doesn't recognize her because he's distracted, and then like it's like, all right, this girl like already has kind of like seen me before. Like he gets into the diner. Oh shit, she's really interesting. Let's strike up a conversation, and then okay.
Yeah,
no,
that's
I think number one, it works either way, but it makes sense that it went the other way.
I think why it works is Kate is more genuine, and she finds him actually charming. Yeah.
The thing that I think is really interesting about the interest in by the way, I said 1930 was the year of women behaving badly. If you would like to see a 1930 movie that has the exact same plot, except she is just out for his money, there's one called The Devil's Holiday, which is the same story, except she is after his money until she falls in love with him for real.
Is she the devil?
I think so. I think it was just like a provocative title, and I was never entirely sure that it tied into the story.
I will say I also saw people comparing this to Sunrise.
Same director.
Because same director, but that starts off with a woman from the city basically seducing a guy from the country to murder his wife so that they can be together. And then
Sunrise also extremely charming.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I do love this. This feels we've talked about, the soundtrack is incredible, but the interactions between the characters feel so often, especially in silent films, they feel the style of acting and the lack of sound make it feel a little distant, and make it feel like something that was truly very long ago and like not part of our lifetime. But these characters and their interactions make so much sense and resonate and feel so universal. Like I know these people now. And I love that, their love story is quick, but I believe in it because I see the way that they interact with each other. And I see that, he's absolutely naive and doesn't know what he's doing, but he's like, this is my once in a lifetime chance. I'm going to, find this girl who I really like. And the fortune told me that if I marry her, it'll work out. So he goes for it. And she's like, this has got to be better than what I have. And I really like that it kind of plays around with the, I think this is something that still resonates, like plays around with the rural versus urban stereotypes.
I was about to say, I wrote down at one point, they are really like pushing the idyllic rural life.
And then she gets there and she's like, and she sees the flip side of that, where like, absolutely, yes. I mean, it reminds me a little bit of the controversy of the new Jason Aldean song, which is praising the value of a small town, but missing the fact that for a lot of people, those small town values also mean that they do not let a lot of people in and are fiercely aggressive against people who are not part of them sometimes. And that can be a flip side of being protective of your own people, is that you get really exclusive of everybody else. And that's what she finds, is that like she is not immediately welcomed into this space by anyone except for the mother, and that her husband has not had to stand up against this at any point. And so he's like, when that moment happens, when she's like, your father is treating me badly, he's like, I don't know what to do. He's like, this is not a thing he ever thought he would have to figure out.
Initially, he's like, I'm gonna punch him. I'm gonna go fight him. And then mom's like, you can't do that. And then instead, like, he's just like, I can't fight him. And it was like, yeah, but you can talk to him. You don't have to punch him in the face.
But what I love is that it feels like a really real response, because if that is not something that you ever thought you were going to have to do, he already clearly lives a little bit in fear of his father, that he is the one, who was responsible for selling this wheat so that his family can keep going. And he did not get the bare minimum price that was requested. And he's like, so he's already coming home in a little bit of fear of that. And it makes total sense to me that his initial response would be like, I don't know if this is a thing that I can actually do. And so I really think that the way that so often I think stories like that are either don't allow for character growth, which this one definitely does. He learns that he needs to stand up for her and that he needs to say, you need to treat her better, but it's not an immediate thing because he's never had to make this decision before. And the very first time we have to stand up for something or change or confront somebody, and we've never had to do it ever before, we usually don't make the right choice. We usually back down because we're like, I don't know if I'm supposed to do this. And so it felt extremely real to me that he wanted to be there for her. He wanted to help her, but he was like, I don't know what to do. And it took him a little while to really figure out, no, this is important. This is worth protecting. We had these big dreams. We can still make these dreams happen. I just have to do my part and stand up and protect her against my father and the other men.
Yeah, because we haven't really even mentioned the harvesters that come, which really also then add another obstacle, because they all think, oh, he's got this pretty wife. He doesn't deserve her. She should be with me. And they all basically, hit on her. And she, being the amazing character that she is, stands up and is like, no, you guys get the fuck away from me.
Yeah, Mac is a good villain. He's basically the head of the harvesters that come into town.
What I find interesting about that is that he at first kind of comes off as the more respectful of all of them, and then obviously becomes the worst.
You have that creepy leering shot of him where I'm like, all right, I'm paying attention to this guy.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and he does his character is very good at facilitating the drama as it proceeds, because he does manipulate a lot of the situations, because he's just as pining after this woman, and he makes so many twists and turns as far as manipulating the son, the daughter, his wife, and the father respectively, where it kind of keeps the plot going without relying completely on him to be there. Obviously there's the big showdown with him and Lim towards the end of the movie, which is obviously fun. Really quickly, I guess one thing I wanted to say that I wanted to praise this film compared to other silent films that we have had in particular is that an element of this movie that I think works really well with keeping this from feeling as dated. I mean, granted, it's a silent film, so you can only do so much, but from keeping this film as dated as other silent films you might associate with, is the way that it incorporates the text and exposition to the audience. It does a lot of the dialogue is very short and concise. It's very quickly done in its title cards, which makes it very it feels smoother to watch the film, as opposed to previous films we've had where you see just paragraph on this cutaway screen where it's like, all right, I'm pausing to make sure I get all this in. This film circumvents a lot of the pacing issues that could come from the bigger exposition parts by having it done so conveyed via letter or headline or something of the sort. Because like even from the very beginning, the impression we get of the father and mother respectively is done through his holding of the notes from them respectively, and how they're worded differently, how they're communicated differently, where even before you meet the person, you understand basically the dynamic that he's coming home to, and the type of interactions he's going to be looking forward. And so at least for me, when I was watching this, thinking about them coming home, I'm thinking, okay, well, what's Dad going to think about this? You know, granted, we met the father by that point in the film, of course, but
this is not going to make him feel better about the wheat loss.
Well, what I find interesting is that, you know, they get a telegram about the fact that he's gotten married before he gets there. And obviously we see that Dad's not happy about it from the beginning, but they do this really interesting thing where they make a word jump off the page. And what I find interesting is that the word that jumps off the page is not married, it's waitress, which I'm just like, okay.
He's working in the big city and is having to flirt with men to get tips kind of thing.
Yeah. I was just like, wow, that's the one. Okay.
Along with the title cards, I really loved later when they did the thing where as Lem was riding out of town and there's the concern that his dad is going to shoot him and he's coming up and he's yelling, "Father, it's Lem." And then all of a sudden the title card, when he yells "Father," when it's clearly like you can hear it almost because the title card starts small and then expands out like almost like it's being thrown at us. And I love the creative use of that. I was like, this is and there were little things like I really loved. This was so tiny, but it was just such a fun, clever moment where we transition from the parents back home and the father's praying, "Give us this day our daily bread," and then the immediate next shot is bread coming up out of a toaster at the restaurant. And so it's like these wonderful like little tiny moments that just tie the whole thing together and make it feel very fresh, even though it is, you know, almost 100-year-old movie.
Yes. And to that point, I do appreciate the dynamic between, I keep saying dynamic, forgive me, between the diner aspect. I feel like the city and the farm life are very distinctly represented to the point where the film has a constant freshness throughout it, because, you know, it romanticizes, I think, by the end of it, the idea of the farm lifestyle compared to the city life. But when you go into the diner scenes, it feels just so lively. And there's just like this again, this constant busyness, because it's always packed, it's always full. Like as soon as he stands up, there's a guy that takes a seat immediately. You have that, but it feels just unique. It doesn't feel like it's boring or being necessarily condemned. You just see such a big distinction as far as the blocking, as far as the scene compositions. I
love the moment when he comes in for the second visit and there are people like waiting at the bar and somebody stands up and he and somebody else jump both into the seat at the same time. I was like, this just absolutely conveys this sense of that's how it works. There are too many people trying to be in the same place all at the same time. And this is busy, and she doesn't have a second to sit and talk with him about his life.
And
even though she makes the time.
She does while her boss is glaring at her.
And even like me in the background, I'm just thinking like, okay, like, are you gonna get yelled at by somebody for like not working? But at the same time, you're rooting for them.
Yeah. I was about to say, at that point, they're so cute together. That it's just like, let them talk.
And then we see that amazing parallel where all the harvesters are all sitting at the table and she's back to essentially doing the same job that she did, where she's pouring for all of them. And in her head, she's still like, you know, still has this a little bit of an idealization. She obviously has met the dad. So this idea of rural life is not as appealing as it was. But then she meets all of them and they are all essentially the same as the people at the bar at the diner who are watching her when her dress slips up and you can see the top of her stockings. Like so I really love that parallel of like the fact that we have a scene where she is serving a group of men food and sitting in a line is such a beautiful moment of her realizing, I'm still dealing with a lot of the same problems.
And it gives you hope with her character too, because it doesn't make you feel at any point while she's there that she's a burden. The father tries to put that on her.
No, she's like, I know how to do this. I was
going to say, she pitches it. I mean, you know, he's just like, you need to help. she all of a sudden she's competent. She's
she's
like you
arguably
said,
better at her that job than like
she's
either of
serving
them were.
breakfast. It's the
There
thing
was-
that she's done.
So I couldn't remember how it ended. There was a moment where I was like, is she going to harvest all the wheat by herself?
Honestly, I was half expecting for them to just go and her to end up being like this. Like I was
She
like,
stopped the
is
hailstorm.
that how the turn happens with Dad?
I was like,
is that
I don't
she
feel
just
like that
is
happened, but
really
there's-
good at harvesting grain?
There was a moment where I was like,
Yeah.
is this going to happen? And it doesn't. But she's set up as someone who's so competent and so willing to jump in and pitch in. She's not like, and that's again, I think what makes this feel like such a real, these characters feel so fleshed out is that she's not, none of these characters feel one-dimensional to me. Like she feels absolutely like she's okay. This is not ideal, but I'm gonna, you know what? If this, I can jump in. I'm not afraid of hard work. I can make this happen. And so I really love seeing that aspect of her.
Yeah.
Agreed. I will say you guys mentioned the people at the diner. I think in the last scene, there's a guy there that they get into a mild altercation with. And I don't know about you guys, but I kept looking at that guy thinking he looks like Ben Kingsley.
I did not notice.
I mean, it wasn't like every shot. Like it was definitely certain angles, but certain angles I was like, I wrote down, I was like, oh, Ben Kingsley's getting fresh.
There was some other celebrity doppelganger I saw in one of our movies, but I don't think it was him. It was somebody else, but I forgot. I should have written it down. I'll say about the movie too. With the, I mean, obviously, you guys have said it, but the chemistry is fantastic. I think it's like the biggest sell with this movie. I mean, cinematography too was what worked for me. That obviously that sweeping shot of the field is gorgeous and stunning, and I think it's going to be one of the, at least for me, it's probably the most resonant thing in my mind as far as the visual image of this film when I think of it. Their chemistry is great, and I think it's interesting to compare to a lot of other relationships we've seen in previous films where you have that starlet, like knock you out of the park, charismatic female lead, and compared to like more of like, for lack of a better word, simpleton or blander archetype of a character. But I it's not to suggest that with Lim, that actor, I can't remember his name, but I'm not going to look it up. That actor, Charles Farrell, thank you. Charles Farrell, it isn't to suggest that his performance is weak. I think he does a great job. He also has that simpleton charisma that keeps going on with it, which is a nice thing compared to other films where we've had Morocco, where the charisma of the couple was completely driven by Marlene Dietrich. And not even just her. Like, I think we had some disagreement on it, but I think it was the same dynamic with Dvorsky, with the woman in that relationship. We've had a couple others in previous films where it's been, I feel like the she has been like has been steering the ship. Yeah. Whereas I think these two work very well together. Again,
I think it's a much more even match for me.
I think she stands out more. For me, she's the standout of the film. But I think that their relationship they work well together. Yeah. Whereas
you root for them, not for her.
Whereas I mean, as you said with Morocco, it was really just one-sided. In the Divorcee, I will say there was a little bit more interplay, but Norma Shearer definitely, was the stronger of the two. And I will say again, I think Mary Duncan is the standout, but I think these two are so cute together that it really kind of,
and it's fascinating to me because like I often have such a distance from silent films, especially silent dramas. And it's so hard for me to see this. And I just have to say, between this and Sunrise, like Murnau absolutely creates these really believable, really lovable couples and these very real, rooted in human nature scenarios where we believe the love story. We believe that. And that's something that I don't see a lot in these old films just because the difference in time between us. And there's something about Murnau's films especially with the romances that he builds that is just it just is universal and stands that test.
This film has already jumped towards the top of my recommended silent films. For anybody that hasn't seen silent films, this is one of the first ones I'd recommend. And
it's a lot easier to follow than other silent films we've had, like where it's like I didn't obviously you don't have to like go to like Wikipedia if you're not sure about the politics of it. It's very simple story, very easy to digest. So it's very honestly I would argue it's a very good gateway silent film for a lot of people who are maybe hesitant about getting into it.
Absolutely.
Man, a lot of criticisms. I have very few. I like the film quite a bit, but I do have a couple. I think I guess more so one, I guess with some examples to support. The ending felt like it was trying very hard to wrap up a lot of things very quickly on a climactic and epic note, because you have a lot of things being juggled. You have the fight with the harvester and Lem.
Mm-hmm.
You have the father,
and I will say that's very fast.
Yeah,
like I missed it.
It's very quickly done.
Yeah.
You have you also are balancing that with her having just left him. She's somewhere out in the roads. And you have the father who is again still resistant to that relationship, but he's still, he has some vested interest. But I feel like it's trying to tie all of these knots up in a very short sequence of time. Which again, I understand it's the lesser of the two evils, I guess, because they're trying to, they want to end like on a big climactic note. But I think. Go ahead.
I was just saying the only one of those that feels truly rushed is the harvesters all suddenly deciding, oh, we're gonna help. Like that is the one that I feel like the other two are resolved just enough that you can tell it's still going to be a little awkward. They're still going to have some difficulties. They're still going to disagree. They're not the same person, but I feel like it resolves it just enough to like leave. That they're going to be able to make their way forward.
Yes.
The harvester one was so sudden that I was kind of startled. I was like, really? That's the way that ends?
I would have liked more of a fight.
They walk away, and that's like and then Mac is standing behind, I think, or one of the artists is standing. It is Mac, yeah. Okay.
Basically, he's lost his status among.
So that helps a little bit, like really kind of set up that like they have decided he is not a good person, and so that image helped solidify it a little bit. But I do think that it ends so like they were so quick to turn around and be like, we're not going to do this, and then so quick to turn around and be like, we are. And I was like, these are the most fickle workers ever. Do not hire them back.
No,
you defeated Jack, so kill the head, the body will die, I guess.
Yeah.
Every year,
everybody else
kill the main
falls in
harvester.
line.
To establish dominance is what it felt like.
Yeah,
and I agree with you with the dad. I mean, like, I think it's a little bit too much to expect for that relationship to be perfect now that like he's almost killed his son and he comes back from that. My other thing with it, I guess, was more so, you also look at the logistics of her being out on the road. She's left like to go back presumably to the city, but it's also the middle of the night. It's during a hailstorm and she's by herself.
Well, and he shows me, he's like, you're going the wrong direction. So I think that was
I thought,
by the way,
you
need to go that way.
Yeah.
That's just more farm. So I thought that was kind of fun. I was like, that's not why it wasn't a good idea to run away, even if it was that or be kidnapped by Mac.
Yeah. I will also say I kind of like the fact, even though it probably would have been more cinematic or whatever, I kind of like the fact that he just kind of pulls up alongside her and then just like they talk rather than him being like, oh, I'm so sorry. And all just, melodramatic and everything like that. Whereas, there's a lot of melodrama that happens in this film, but I like that scene, it just kind of lets it sit and then just kind of lets them be. And that's what brings them back together. A
lot of times in romances, there is this kind of rushed resolution. And I think that's absolutely the case with the harvesters. I can see that being a little bit of the case with the dad. I think theirs is exactly what I needed, because we needed to have time for him to not be like, we needed it to be clearly, obviously, her choice to come back with him. We need to make sure that he's not forcing her back or
that it wasn't some impassioned speech that coerced her.
But he was just being like, we were super happy.
My dad almost shot me. I love you.
You could do that. I figured out how to do this better. I do still love you. Would you give me another chance? I'm sorry I goofed up.
Yeah.
And it was just enough that I could see it made sense to me that she was like, sure, we'll give this another shot. And not in the sense that I felt like she was like, yes, I, forgive everything. We're all good. But in the sense that it was convincing to me that she was like, let's try this again.
Well, that's supported by him actually having like done something like the entire time, like they're struggling. It's like him being like, maybe I'll talk to him like he's my dad. I can't hit my father, but like, it's like, I mean, even if she hasn't necessarily seen the actions that have taken place, or at least all of them, he is basically saying like, I've done these things, and it's like, all right, well, maybe that is worth a try.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the thing is that like she just needed to see that there was going to be some change. It wasn't going to be. It's not going to go on the way it's been.
Going to do something.
It's not just like, oh, come on, baby, give me another chance. The band will make it. It's not like that kind of bullshit.
Yeah. And so that made it more convincing. Which really was important for that.
I will say, and this is silly, but on Wikipedia it claims that the end goes like this: he fights Mac, berates his father, and then goes searching for Kate. He does not berate his father.
His father berates him with a gun.
I was about to say, unless somebody has a very different definition of berating, he stands up to his father.
Yeah, like he
does not berate his father.
And maybe relative to where he's been able to be. Maybe it probably felt like berating to him.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
He's like, I'll do it. And
Dad, you almost just shot me. I think that, you should
my
give
wife
Kate
is trying to
chance.
save your harvest.
Yes.
Please treat her nicely.
It's like, maybe you should like actually stop and consider what's happening before jumping to conclusions, which is that literally and figuratively the father's struggle throughout the entire film.
Yeah. True. All right. So, I mean, I think we've talked about this one even longer than we did the Blue Angel. Which
I mean, we had more love for this one, so
we all wanted to say good things about it.
It makes sense.
It's true.
Yeah.
All right. Well, then, if there's nothing else that anybody needs to particularly say, let us go ahead and move on to our next film in this, and that is what's the man's name?
Howard Hughes.
Howard Hughes. That is the Howard Hughes film Hell's Angels. So let's check this out.
Deviation and motion. He defied convention, set new patterns for others to follow, made stars of unknowns, and left the world a legacy of film classics. This is one of them. Hell's Angels. When Hell's Angels opened in 1930, it was acclaimed as one of the greatest films in the history of motion pictures up to that time, and no wonder. It took 2.5 years to shoot, cost $4 million, equivalent today to over 20 million, used 87 planes and 137 pilots in aerial combat so real it took the lives of 3 pilots. So spectacular was the world premiere showing of Hell's Angels, it has not been equaled to this day. The announcer who covered the event reported.
All right. Yeah. So less of a trailer, more of a, hey, Hell's Angels was cool, right?
Yeah.
But yeah.
This was Hell's Angels. First of all, I'm going to say with that trailer, if you're listening at home, it starts out with this picture of Howard Hughes, and I don't know if it was the same for you two, but the longer you stare at that, the more sinister it just kind of looks.
Yes,
it's almost like a haunted mansion sort of thing, where the
man.
picture, it just. So this is Hell's Angels. From 1930, based, of course, off of the 1967 novel by Hunter S. Thompson of the same name. It talks, well, I'm going off of IMDb's description, but I think it's bullshit. Brothers Monty and Ray leave Oxford to join the Royal Flying Corps.
I don't.
Well,
okay.
We'll keep going with it. We'll
Monty
disagree.
and Ray is right, but was this really written by Hunter S. Thompson?
Yeah, in 1967, based off of his book.
Okay.
Ray loves Helen. Loves
67.
Helen enjoys an affair with Monty before
no.
they leave on their mission over Germany.
This movie did take a long time to make.
So. Still in another man's arms.
It didn't take that long. Though.
And that's
I mean, that plot is right.
Yeah,
but
no,
I
it's
don't
not.
think it was...
That plot is incorrect. At least it's a poor synopsis of the film.
Sure.
Because this is Hell's Angels. If you know of this movie, it's more likely than not from The Aviator, the Scorsese film. It was directed by famous director Howard Hughes, who I, especially after watching this, kind of consider a progenitor to the types of Christopher Nolan, where it's the movie that, or even like a James Cameron, where it's like the style and the technique is more of the draw to the filmmaking perspective than necessarily the story.
Yeah.
Yeah, the film follows basically two brothers throughout their experiences in the war. They're two very different personality types. With Ray being a lot more the straight man type character, with Monty being the very much flirtatious and just he's a womanizer basically, and that's kind of his driving factor throughout a lot of the course of the film, which creates a lot of twists and turns, drama and such. Well, to varying degrees, and between them, I guess, is a character named Helen, who ultimately, spoiler alert, isn't really all that important in the story. But I felt like she was, again, we could talk more about her as we go along, but I think she was more of a tool to express the differences than an actual character.
Yeah.
She was my Mrs. Rittenhouse of this recording, because I thought she was awful in this film. Absolutely awful. But again, we could talk more about that. Like I said, the movie, for me, I ranked it higher than others. My biggest thing was not because the story was all that great. I think the story picks up some speed towards the end of the film, as far as characterizations, drama, and whatnot go. But the driving thing for me is just like how well this movie is made. There was a lot of work that went into this movie. There was a lot of delays. The film was just a nightmare to the producers because of how expensive it was, and it shows when you watch the film, because it didn't help that the movie started out as a silent film, and they're like, well, these talky things are getting pretty big, let's go ahead and convert it over to that because we have to, because this movie probably would have struggled a lot harder if it was falling behind the wayside of the.
I mean, a lot of that was Howard Hughes. He just wanted to be on the cutting edge of everything.
But you have to be with this kind of type of film, because what drives it is just how ambitious so much of the filmmaking was. And for you to say like, well, okay, we're going to make this technically impressive film, but it's going to be behind the trend. It's like, well, you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot with that. So they went as far as to add sound. They did some color, which I think this may have been one of, if not the only color film that we've seen so far.
It was the only scenes of color for Jean Harlow's entire career.
So when I saw that, I'm like, whoa.
Yeah. And honestly, the color sequence is good. Like, it looks good.
And it's not even all that complex. Like, you have some scenes where it's just a flat color across, but it does convey a lot of, it applies color theory very well. You have like a sense of dread with some of the darker maroons that are overlaid with some of the blimps flying and whatnot. So that was effective to me. But I mean, like I said, for the first 40 minutes, for a while, I was just thinking this was going to be pretty low, because again, that first 40 minutes or so is very much just brother relationship drama, which, it's fine. I don't think any of the acting in this film is particularly memorable, particularly hers, but we'll get to that. But once you start getting the flying sequences, it's almost like a Top Gun Maverick sort of thing. It's like everyone walking away from loving Top Gun Maverick, their highlights are going to say are the flight sequences above and beyond. And I think this film is extraordinary in that case. You see again, if you watch the trailer that we showcased, you see so many complex shots of all these planes, real planes, flying around, performing aerial stunts. And even when you have much more choreographed flights, you just see these impressive maneuvers and aerial dogfight. It honestly rivals a lot of the dogfights that we see in more recent films, and at least the ones that I've seen. So it really does push the boundary and show. I mean, obviously, as the trailer pointed out, there were deaths involved, there were accidents involved. Howard Hughes was involved in a very debilitating plane crash that you see filmed towards the end of the film, and when you watch it, your jaw just drops.
Yeah,
because it's like, how the hell did they do that? And the answer is
they did it.
They did it.
Exactly.
They really did it.
The only way you can fathom. And so now, does it suggest there's a morality idea with that behind the message of it? Of course.
I mean, at least he did that one himself.
Yeah.
But still,
the fact that whether or not you look at the right or wrong of it, the fact that you do have such a visceral and raw technical effect being presented in a 1930 film is a wonder in and of itself. And that really does make the film on its own worth watching. Just recognize that, the explosions, again, these aren't like miniatures. These aren't like props. These are actual things. You see bullet holes being really blown into the side of things. These are this is something that I wouldn't see done until like Come and See many years later. So we can open up for discussion from there, but that's my initial take on it.
I really think that there's something so fascinating to me about, because I'm very much with you that like I ranked this one lowest of the four that I really loved, but there's something so interesting about the way the film is made. The story is fine. I kind of like the big dramatic ending. That works for me.
I agree.
But like that was the moment where I was like, oh yeah, this is gonna work. But I love that we have these. I think the color sequences are really interesting and juxtaposed against the black and white ones. I was really fascinated by because we don't. At least I haven't seen this a lot in my 1930s thing, but we have these sequences where we focus in on the German pilots and what they're doing. And
Red Baron.
Of course, as one would expect from 1930, but I hadn't considered it, their subtitles are presented as title cards. And I was like, oh, like I hadn't even thought about it. But it's really fascinating that all these different techniques that are left over from different eras and popping up in new eras really kind of it lends itself to this, and then combining the 1930 melodrama story, simplistic story, with these incredible shots, really gives it this sort of. It feels like a big epic sprawling film that encompasses years and years and years of stuff, and part of that is this sort of mishmash of different styles and techniques and methods of telling the story, and so even if there were moments where I was like not completely taken with individual parts, by the end, I felt like it feels like a whole complete fascinating little piece. And I really like that. I think that sort of collection of different pieces of technology that kept coming up as this thing took longer and longer to make really lend to the atmosphere of this big epic scope, which I really, really enjoy. I was more taken with the story the first time I watched it, and the second time I was like, okay, I know where this is going. The individual beats are not as interesting. I agree, Jean Harlow doesn't do a lot. Like I don't actively dislike her in this as much. She's just kind of there.
But she's the she's the top billing for this. So if you look at the
I was about to say of this, as you said, a lot of these films of women behaving badly, she is more in that camp that I mentioned before of this is bad. Women shouldn't be like this kind of thing. It's more like a wagging of the finger at this character,
and it tries to paint her as something duplicitous, like she's this sweet, serene, demure type with one brother, and then she's her true, adventurous self around the other one. But you never get that from the very first moment, even the first picture you see of her, which is hilarious. She's like crouched, like she's taking a dump on the grass, and like her back is turned to you.
It says a lot more about the brother that he thinks that this is that she is a sweet person.
That's a great looking girl.
He's like, she is like this all the time, but the brother's like, no, she's super sweet.
No,
she's clearly not.
And the way that they resolve that relationship with her just basically like berating him and all, and that's the last scene she gets in the movie. It's like, oh, you guys really don't want us to like this character at all.
Oh
no. I will say she
is what most of these 1930 women behaving badly movies are. You get more Jean Harlow here and less Marlene Dietrich than I would like.
Agreed. I will say of these 5 films, this was my my bottom, but I did not dislike this film. Everything that you guys have said, the positives about it, I agree. The visual spectacle of this film is phenomenal. It's very impressive to watch, and even I find the story interesting, but I ultimately found a lot of the performances flat. And there was nothing. I honestly find the story of, 2 brothers, one who's a constant fuck up, and the other one who's constantly, covering for him, as actually kind of an intriguing story. I just didn't feel like the performances really carried it the way I would like it to. Not to say they were bad. I just think that they weren't being asked to carry as much of the movie as they probably should have.
You could tell that the interest in this was primarily in the spectacle and the fight scenes. Agreed. And so the character things were there, but they were taking a back seat.
Yeah,
I would go as far as to call it like an Avatar of its time. It's like all.
I was going to say the
special effects.
Avatar, the James Cameron comparison feels absolutely apt.
These
That it's
brothers
like,
are
you go
Sam
in and you
Worthington.
love the technological spectacle and you love the tech aspects of this, but you're not going to remember the story when you come out.
And,
like,
and unfortunately, it stars Sam Worthington.
Yeah, it's similar to what we said about like the Marx Brothers movies or the Astaire and Rogers movies, is that we're here to see one particular thing, and the plot is really kind of secondary.
Yeah,
like I said, I find the plot actually more interesting than the film is kind of giving it credit for. So I would have liked that to have been given a little bit more. I mean, it's very melodramatic.
Really works. I was surprised by how drawn in I was at the ending, because I was not feeling the relationship, and then suddenly that ending happened, and I went, "Oh man, that hit me."
I was not expecting as bleak of an ending as this is.
No,
because I mean, spoilers for a film from 1930, they end up killing each other. Well, the one brother ends up killing the other one and then going off to
shoots in the back.
To be shot by the firing squad.
Which in fairness, they were told it was a suicide mission.
Yeah.
So it's like, this is the best case scenario.
Yeah.
I agree with you too. The story isn't like a bad story. I think my issue, and I think the way it could have been improved, would have been where I think it works towards the ending. I think it was as it progressed, it was interspersed better with the action and technical scenes. If you compare this to something like The Wages of Fear, the 50s film, that film has a similar structure where it has like a lot of time spent on the character setups and the drama and what leads them into that, but it keeps those things going as the action progresses. It keeps them kind of married together. And I think this film doesn't really do that until the very last act of the film, which is, I think, why that shines compared to the rest. Again, it's not an amazing story, but it's also not a bad one where you feel like uninterested completely in it. There's something there. I just think that there was so much effort put into the capturing of the special effects and action scenes where it feels
a little bit like they're taking a break from the story to do the action scenes.
You see a priority.
Nice if it felt like they were continued on.
There's a prioritization. Now we talked about the acting though. There was one shout out I got to give with this movie, and that's in Lucien Preval, whose performance as Baron von Krantz was amazing.
Is he the one at the end?
He's in the beginning too.
Oh, I forgot that. He's the one guy, interrogating them.
No, he's the guy who has the duel with him.
He
is this goofy Bond villain type character, and I love every
especially
bit of
at the end. Especially at the end.
He was wonderful
mustache
contrast.
Twirly, and I mean, he's wearing a he's wearing glasses.
He has a monocle at one point.
Okay, I was like, he's got a monocle. I'm crying out loud.
I see you're ready to talk, Mr. Bond. It's like it's that performance, and compared to how dry the brothers' performances have been respectively, it's just such a nice and again, he's not just in the end, he's in the beginning. You have a hint of him, so when he comes back, I'm like, oh, it's that guy again. Cool.
I missed that it was the same character. That's super fun.
Oh yeah, I mean they even say
I completely forgot that.
He's like, oh, it's you again. Yeah.
Completely missed that on the second viewing.
I will say, I want to, number one, what I think is very interesting is that our leads are all supposed to be British. They're all clearly American, not even trying to do British accents. But all of our Germans, not only speaking German, but then using German accents. And I'm just like, what? Okay.
It's like halfway between All Quiet and the Western Front. It's like halfway between there.
As long as you're separating out the good guys from the bad guys. That's all we really need, right?
But I will say, I want to make a point on the mentality of the 1930s audiences to now, because when this movie came out, this was a big breakout for Jean Harlow. She was basically the sex symbol for that era. And I mean, she had a relatively short career, but that's really what her career was based on, was this sex symbol status. Notice none of us have mentioned how attractive or alluring we found her. The person that both Jack and I found absolutely sexy was Norma Shearer. Now imagine if in 1930, instead of being fascinated and then basing her career on Jean Harlow, Marilyn Monroe had cottoned on to Norma Shearer, we would have had she might have been much happier, to be honest. I mean, obviously Norma Shearer had her own acclaim and her own status, but it wasn't the same, like, whereas, Jack and I were both like, yeah, no, she's sexy, and nothing for Jean Harlow.
I'm sending you a quick chat.
Oh. Oh. But so let's not just sit and wait for this chat. Anybody else got anything they want to say about this movie?
Yeah, just send it to you on Facebook.
On Facebook, of course.
Sorry, it's an image.
Okay. All right. I'll take a look at it later.
Sure.
But yeah.
No, go ahead. I'm pretty much have said my piece.
Okay. Yeah, I was about to say. I mean,
if that was most of it for me.
Yeah. I was about to say. I think that's about it. Not a whole, like I said, visually interesting, but unfortunately, I think that the film lets down its plot that is, I think, better than it is expecting it to be. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so let us go ahead though, and let us move into the fourth film, which is actually our host pick for this group, and that is Madam Satan. All right, so here we go.
What was that call? Did you hear it? It's sending this call from you. Jimmy, do you know the devil? No, but I'm going to. Wow. Well, wait. Oh, we're glad that's all with us, and a new thrill you give us. Won't you please tell us who you are?
All right, we had to cut it off somewhere. All right, so Hannah, this is your pick for 1930. So why don't you go ahead and share with us, your background with this and why you chose it?
Yeah, so Madam Satan is an early Cecil B. DeMille. I guess not that early. He was doing stuff very early. Is a Cecil B. DeMille.
He did silent films.
Yeah, I was going to say he was working well in the 20s. Yeah. It stars Kay Johnson, Reginald Denny, Lillian Roth, and Roland Young. I had on rewatch, I realized that Lillian Roth was the actress from Animal Crackers who I loved the most. Who was just
I thought she looked familiar.
The girlfriend of the painter who was like, let's get you on. And I was like, oh yeah, no, I still love her.
There's a lot of repeat actors in this group of films that we've chosen.
Yeah, you start to really see the same people coming back. So yeah, it was it's an interesting. I chose it because it was one of in a year where I had been watching lots and lots and lots of women behaving badly films, and this was different in the sense that it went directions I did not expect, and the premise is a little bit more familiar. At least the first part is a woman finds out her husband is cheating on her, and she decides that he leaves her to be with this other woman, and she decides to get him back on a party at a Zeppelin where she dresses up in costume and flirts with him, and then at the end the Zeppelin goes down and it's a disaster movie all of a sudden, and they land and it's great. It's such it's clearly like at least largely comedic, but there's so many like these farcical moments where the husband is trying to cover up his affair and make that all happen, and then this character comes in and is and her husband is unhappy with her because she's cold and frigid and withholding of affection, and so his mistress is like, you don't know how to get him back, and she's like, I will. And so she dresses up in this provocative costume and shows up, as you heard in the trailer, at this party, and everybody's like, whoa, this woman in the devil costume. I had so much fun with this movie. It's so weird. Wikipedia even says Madam Satan has been called one of the oddest films DeMille made, and certainly one of the oddest MGM made during Hollywood's golden age.
You don't say.
It's such a weird movie, and
It's
has
fun,
such.
though.
It's so much fun, and these there are so many like little moments where I'm just like, this was. I wish that the version. I think the version I have was the one that I passed on to you folks to be able to watch, and I wish that there was a better preserved version that I had, because I would really love to see some of these, especially once you get to the Zeppelin and everybody's on these like elaborate themed outfits. And when I first saw it, I had to clip out there's a part just abruptly in the middle where all of a sudden it just shoots to the dancers and they're all in like clock outfits and just dancing back and forth. And I was like, and for like 5 seconds, and then we move on. And so I had to clip that out and put it on Facebook and be like, this is the movie I'm watching. It's so silly, and the story, it matters so little, but it's just such a fun, ridiculous ride. And it was I hadn't seen, it reminds me a little bit in the sense, actually, I had a similar reaction to The Unholy Three, where I was like, I don't know what this is, but I'm having a blast watching it. And there are so few movies, and watching movies from almost 100 years ago, and we'll talk about this a little bit more with Big House, where you start to see the things that later became standard tropes of a genre. It's sometimes it's a delightful surprise when a movie can like genuinely where I genuinely surprised by it. I'm like, I don't know what's going on here, and I love it. And so I really enjoyed that. I love these big dramatic costumes. I love that it switches locations halfway through and is suddenly set entirely at this elaborate Zeppelin party. We have some fun song and dance numbers that come out of nowhere and are just so much fun. And so I recommended Madam Satan, not necessarily because it was the best movie I'd seen in 1930, but it was one that I knew wasn't going to get on the list any other way, and it was one that I figured was fun and campy and absolutely worth watching.
Sure.
This is an interesting mix for us with our host choices, because we first week we had Clay's pick, which was a farcical, almost like screwball comedy-esque musical. Week 2 we get mine, this like absolute insanity, like nonsense film. And then like Hannah, week 3 is like, why not both?
Yeah, I was about to say, she does a mix. let's get an oddball musical. Yeah.
Exactly.
And which, funnily enough, the musical thing, like, I'm not surprised that you picked a musical, Hannah. Like, I didn't know this going into the film, of course, but I was like, but it just comes out of nowhere, because like that, I think the main character just like suddenly just starts singing.
Well, and then I kept forgetting that it was a musical, and so like I laughed again when they're bringing people onto the Zeppelin, and the pilot's like, "Come on up," and I was like, "What is going on?"
Well, I mean, I think the first song, it's just the maid suddenly starts singing to her, and it's like,
there's no opening number. It's just like,
just here we go.
It's like,
no introduction.
Okay. I guess we're
going. Singing now.
Okay. Oh, is this a musical, or is this the way you guys interact? Is this
well, and then there's this weird moment afterwards where like the maid finishes her thing, and then the music is still going super loud, but the actress is just talking, but her stuff doesn't rhyme. But I was like trying to figure out, is she trying to talk? Like, is this her speak singing a verse?
Is this a bridge or something? Yeah.
And there are speak singing songs in this. There's the auction song, which is like basically like a pre-rap.
The one where they just bring out all the girls and we're like, tell us a joke about what you're dressed as.
Yeah. I will say, though, especially towards the end, I don't know if you guys had as much problem as I did, but I had a lot of issues with the audio for some of
Oh,
this,
yeah.
especially towards the end. I
Yeah.
had a hard time understanding what they were saying.
It did get,
in
yeah,
that,
the audio
in that
was a
later
lot more
scene.
muddled than I wanted it
Yeah.
to be. Again, I want a better preserved version of this. And there might be
Yeah.
one out there. I just wasn't able to find it.
Honestly, those parts made me laugh, like when the audience is just so shit. It kind of reminds me of like something from Blue Angel, like when they open and shut the door to the backstage area, where it's just like all sound and then none at all. It's like
Yep.
there's a couple moments like this, especially when you have like the disastrous elements of the blimp crashing. Sidebar, this is completely from an uninformed position. Where was like weather prediction a thing back then?
I don't know.
Like, it feels weird to ask that, but like the fact that you have this is like a huge extravagant blimp party, like apparently during like the worst storm
during
ever.
a thunderstorm. Yeah.
This
Yeah.
is
I mean,
why you
you know,
shouldn't
it's
do this.
it probably, I mean, I do know there was definitely a point at which weather forecasting got better.
Oh yeah. I
So
hope
it was definitely before that.
I mean, it's
that
not
wasn't
that-
until like the 60s or 70s.
I wouldn't
Like,
say it
that
got
was-
much better over here in Georgia, but who knows?
Yeah.
They're still
but-
holding Zeppelin parties over there in the middle
Yeah.
of the storms.
We have a forecast for snow today.
Yeah.
So, no, I do like the musical numbers in this. Again, this movie does feel like two very distinctly different movies when you kind of break them down act wise.
It feels like he got bored halfway through and was like, let's bring in the Zeppelin.
And it's
Yeah.
fun. Like, I mean, this is like one of the, one of the things I kind of criticize with a lot of musicals, which again, it's a formulaic thing, and I understand why it's the case, but you seldom see the
Yeah.
standout number being the opening of an act two. It just seldom, it's seldomly but for me, that was the best musical number in the
Yeah.
whole movie. It's like very chaotic and like almost like dark. We're like,
Yeah.
we're walking across they're like literally saying what they're doing. We're walking across the catwalk. We're going to the, and it's a cool. It almost has like a very industrial sound to it, which is kind of
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
emphasizing
and with that kind of visual of them inside this blimp on the stairways, it
Mhm.
feels a little industrial as well.
Well, and all their costumes are very like mechanical and futuristic-y, which is
Yeah.
like they never really get into why or like what the like whether this is the theme of the party or what.
Yeah.
but yeah, we have this sort of industrial mechanical vibe to it all of a
Yeah.
sudden.
I will say, just to kind of get into the relationships of the film, this film kept reminding me of The Divorcee. Now, granted,
Most of the
I think
1930s
yeah,
movies have that plot.
yeah,
yeah.
I think this is more fun than The Divorcee, but I arguably believe like he deserved for her to go back to him even less than the
No,
guy.
that's
in the
totally
Divorcee.
fair. Their relationship, by far, my favorite performances are the mistress and the best friend.
Oh yeah,
I
oh, God.
love the best friend. Oh my
Jimmy?
god,
I had to
that
look him up.
guy,
He's-
Jimmy.
He's in
Jimmy
Philadelphia.
was the
I
goat.
was like,
That's why I know
Jimmy,
him.
the best.
He's
I
so good.
love
He
Jimmy.
made the first act for me, like far and away. He was
Agreed.
amazing.
Agree.
And his name is Roland. People named Roland aren't supposed to be funny.
I love the
Is-
scene
is
where
that
they're
his
like
last
where
name?
where
Roland
they're
Young.
trying to pretend that he
Oh,
and the mistress are married
the
and they're hiding. They're lying down in the bed and they keep getting up and she keeps walking on it and they have to lie back down.
Yeah. Yeah. No, the
So
physical
funny, it's so
comedy that
silly.
they do in this, and just Jimmy is anytime Jimmy's in a scene, I'm watching Jimmy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just hated his because the
he's the
film
worst.
almost agrees with him at times, and I'm just like, I'm not on board with his perspective at all. Because he's like, it's all right that I'm stepping out on you because you're cold and you're
I need
mean.
more affection than you get. And I'm like, no.
Yeah.
I
and I'm just
wasn't
like,
sure halfway
no.
through. I couldn't tell if she was going to initially if she was going to try to actually win him back or if it was just a revenge thing. Like I'm going to like
Same. Make
break
a
up
fool
your
of you.
relationship with your mistress and then leave you.
Yeah.
And I don't know,
would've been
maybe
on
that was
board
going to be
for
the
that.
plan. And then everything exploded, and she was like,
Yeah.
"Well, now we're together again."
Yeah, honestly, this probably would have been higher if that had been what
Mhm.
happened. I just really didn't like the because basically he gets turned based on what happens. It does what she says. He's going to get tired of this type of woman, and he turns into the fuddy-duddy. And I'm just like, yeah,
Damn.
I'm not really on board for that read. But
It's the same reason why I put the divorcee behind last week. Because like, same thing. It's like this resolution doesn't feel like it's earned.
Oh, no.
Because it doesn't feel like a healthy relationship at all that's being
Oh, no.
reconciled. Acting wise, Jimmy was my goat by far. I didn't love the actress who played Madam Satan, and I blank on her actual name.
Kay Johnson. She was
like I wanted her to
okay.
be hyping that up a lot.
I was
more.
about to say, honestly, if
I
you
want
had
Eartha
Norma
Kitt.
Shearer in this movie, I mean, number one, it would have been wild. But I like I said, this was more fun, but she was much more bland.
Yeah, I want yeah,
Which
the
works
two
for the
leads
first
were a
part.
lot less interesting than the supporting cast, and I
Agreed.
wanted them to have that same energy of like I loved the mistress's energy of just like Trixie just being
Trixie was
just
great.
Trixie was so much fun. She was my favorite in Animal Crackers too. I really love how she just seems to be having a great time no matter what she's doing.
Yeah,
and
Lillian Roth is her name.
And you can't put on that elaborate devil costume and show up and make a big entrance like that and then not camp it up bigger than that. So like that's my main complaint with the movie. Is that, like, turn up the camp all the way for the leads, and I am 100% on board.
I liked her when she was being Madam Satan. Yes, could I have used a little bit more camp? Yes, but I liked the French accent she's putting on.
Yes.
I liked the playfulness of her. I could have used a little bit more, as you say, but yeah, I like there are parts of her performance that I did appreciate, but at no point did I ever feel like this is at the exact right level. I always felt like it could have been a little bit more.
Yeah.
The interesting thing about the first part, especially up until her introduction in the second act of Act 2, it reminded me very much of two different pieces. It's one being the opening of Phantom of the Opera Act 2 with the whole masquerade with the Phantom coming in thing, and
it
also
felt very Phantom at times.
Yes,
and then similarly was to a lesser degree the depending who you ask, the auction scene from the auction party scene from Batman and Robin, and to the point where I refuse. One of those filmmakers had to have been influenced by it, whether Schumacher or actually wait, Schumacher did both. Holy shit,
Schumacher did both. Yeah,
he had to have seen this movie.
Schumacher was a huge fan of Madam Satan.
Honestly,
Must have been.
I was about to say this seems like a film that Schumacher would have liked.
It does.
Yeah. So like I refuse to believe he didn't draw some influence from this film, like for either his Phantom or Batman and Robin, because the presentation, the style, the story, it's very similar to me in a fun way. It's very playful with that, and yeah, obviously like shit goes to 11 once the storm destroys the blimp. I'm like, oh shit, we're going Titanic up in here. Like you get a parachute.
And then they're like falling down in the middle of a group of men. Dressing group sitting in
I was gonna say,
with a lion attacking them.
Yeah, I liked the humor that they went at with because honestly, the only one that ended up landing in a good spot completely unscathed was Angela, the Kay Johnson character. Yeah. Everybody else like landed in an inappropriate place or in a place where they got more, injured or this, that, or the other. Yeah.
Question. Do you two remember, circling back to the auction thing, how much they bet for her?
Oh, it was a lot.
Was it like 3,000?
Yes, I think ultimately
right.
it was like 3,000.
Because for context, that's $53,000 today. Which is absurd. Can we talk about the costumes? Like not even just like Madam Satan's and
but like all the costumes.
They were so they're like, hey, guess what I am? And there was always like the stupidest it'd be like a proverb or something.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't understand any of these costumes.
Yeah, that scene with Jimmy where he had picked like the top 6 and they were coming in to like, I guess, present themselves. Yeah, that was interesting because he would always just be like, what are you?
I'm Potter.
But the same about like all the dancers, I had the same thought where the servers who came in like their little cars and had drinks for people. I was like, what am I even looking at? It was all fascinating, and again made me wish that I had a better preserved version so that I could really see the details on these, because I was like, I feel like there's so much going on that I'm only seeing in horribly pixelated form off of a VHS DVD digital transfer TV transfer from years ago or something.
Because as a whole, it just looks like they just like raided like an entire like community theater's wardrobe and just like made it work.
This looks good. This looks good. Let's just...
Hey, Spring, how can we make this work? Oh, she's Hope Springs Eternal. Let's glue it to her. It's like that's the kind of shit that you get in this movie. And I'm like, that's why I was like on board for you. I was like, no, this is hilarious.
I really enjoyed Trixie's costume with all the feathers and everything. That one was fun.
Especially like when it kept getting in the way of things.
Yes.
when it became like an encumbrance, not even just herself, but other people.
Yeah.
It reminded me of
people in the face with the feathers.
Yeah.
Reminded me of that woman from like the Oscars this past year who was like that image that went viral of her like blocking people sitting behind her.
Yeah.
Reminded me of that. It was funny.
Yeah.
Yeah,
somebody should wear this to next year's Oscars. That outfit.
Don't tempt them. Now that we put the idea out there.
Absolutely. So,
all
right. Well, are we ready to move on to our final film?
Yeah, best one. Let's do it.
All right. Let us go ahead. We are now going to be talking about the final film in this group. It was the film that was nominated for Best Picture. It is The Big House.
I'm not going to be killed for something I didn't do. If you come one step nearer, give me your foot. I want to go. I didn't know if you wanted to tank. I'm going to throw a slug between your horns. Say up, I can. Brother, this is Buffalo. They're all wrong, folks. Boga didn't turn you in. Even the screws are protecting him. Come on, let's go in and get him. I must be losing my guts. I'm going blind. You're all right. It's only the gas. Morgan, we're coming after you, you snake. I want your foot.
All right.
So much yelling.
So that is The Big House. As I said, it is one of the films that was nominated for Best Picture from 1930. It is, let's see, it was directed by George Hill. Music, there was no music. And it starred Chester Morris, Wallace Beery, Robert Montgomery, Layla Himes, Lewis Stone, George F. Marion, many, many more. This film, honestly, number one, has the most repeat cast members. Because as I mentioned, Chester Morris was also the husband in The Divorcee. Right. Then you've got George F. Marion, who was the dad in Anna Christie. You've got Robert Montgomery, who was also in The Divorcee. He was the guy that she slept with. And I mean, I would be interested to see if there are even more. But yeah, I kept watching this movie going, oh, he was in that. Oh, he was in that. And oh, yeah. But yeah, basically, this is a film that is about prison, of course. It's very much about kind of the sad state of the prison system and why it needs to be reformed. It's very much a message picture. But it follows the character of initially it follows the character of Kent, played by Robert Montgomery, who's basically has been convicted of manslaughter and is being brought into a prison system in a prison that's only designed for 1,800, and they have already 3,000. So not quite double, but pretty close of what they should have, to the point where there are not just 2 people in a cell that's really just built for 1, but 3, to the point where if you notice, if all 3 of them are in there, one of them has to be on a bunk. Otherwise they can't fit. And his cellmates are Butch, played by Wallace Beery, who is a convicted murderer, and to the point where he keeps talking about people like lovingly and then being like, yeah, I killed them, you know. Yeah. And then we also have Morgan, played by Chester Morris, who is basically was a crook and a con man. Eventually he becomes the main protagonist. And Kent kind of fades into the background a little bit. We're kind of more just focusing on Kent to see how he is being kind of broken down by this system and being taught the wrong things. He becomes arguably more crooked and twisted inside than he would have been outside, is basically the argument. I will say most of his bad decisions come from just not listening to Morgan, to the point where I'm just like, why? Because at no point are we shown that Morgan has given you bad advice, but he gets bad advice from another group of prisoners and now takes it out on Morgan. I don't know. But eventually at one point in the film, Morgan is supposed to be getting out on parole. And because of something that Kent does, he gets not only more on his sentence, but gets put in the hole. He decides to break out, meets Kent's family, and actually falls in with them pretty well, but then is sent back to prison. And he's kind of reformed from there, basically making the argument that he actually, the reformation you want him to have, he got on the outside, being influenced by better people, not being locked away in this horrible prisons. I mean, they say within the first 10 minutes of the movie, yeah, the prison system's horrible. So it's pretty obvious kind of the tact that this film is taking. I will say, this is a film that I went into really looking forward to because I'd heard a lot of really good things. I didn't like it as much as I was hoping to. But there were, I will say, of the two Chester Morris films, I think this is his better performance. And I like Wallace Beery in this film. Wallace Beery actually would win Best Actor the next year for The Champ, which if you ever want a sports movie that will make you cry, watch The Champ. Definitely a good one to check out. And his character in this is interesting, I will say, because he floats back and forth between being kind of cuddly and then the very next moment he's ready to slit your throat. So, it's a very interesting, volatile character. I think he's kind of representative of the type of person. I think they're trying to represent, like, Kent is a guy that doesn't belong in this system. Being here makes him worse. Morris is a representative of someone who does end up changing for the better, but outside of the prison system that he's been put in. And whereas Wallace Beery is representing, these are the type of people that belong in prison. So yeah, it's definitely, like I said, making a point. Sometimes it's a little overdrawn, especially with the scenes from The Warden. But for the most part, I didn't feel like it was so much so, like I didn't feel like I was being preached to so much that I couldn't enjoy the film. But yeah, so that is my take on this. What do you guys think?
I think a lot of this movie for me is actually really interesting for us to have had this type of movie on our list, seeing as we had Shawshank to discuss at length in our previous iteration of this podcast.
I was going to say, this is obviously a film that would have set up the tropes followed by Shawshank.
And with Shawshank being, I think we can fairly argue, if not The Green Mile, to be pretty much the definitive prison movie of at least current age. There's a lot of interesting things to kind of compare to this movie, and I think a lot of what makes it interesting to me is its concepts, less so than its execution of them. I think that the movie has, as you pointed out a couple times, Clay, it has interesting things with character representations as far as like how they transition, what they are within the system, and I think compared to a lot of the things we think of when we think of prison dramas or even comedies to this day, I feel like a lot of these are flipped. In that, like, you have the idea of the warden being a pretty reasonable person, like not like this corrupt individual, or like this hard ass, like, nonchalant, like type of person that you see oftentimes stereotyped today. You have, for the most part, prisoners who are bad people. It's not the type of thing where it's trying to argue like a Shawshank, where it's like, these people may have done bad things, but they have become better people. It's like some of them are just bad apples from the start to finish because of the actions that they do. I think I'm looking up the character names here. Where did it go? I think let me just say with the Morgan character, I think he is one that's a little bit more familiar to us. I think he's more comparable to a Red from Shawshank type of character, where they've done bad things, maybe not as bad as Red had done, but still things, but they also have gained some morality, the intended idea of the prison treatment, whereas there's been some redemption with that person. They are aren't necessarily going to do the bad things they previously did. Which is the other character that leads the shootout, correct? Yeah. So I think with him, I don't look at him as much of a villain in this as much as I do with the Kent character. I think I looked at Butch's character as more of a more immoral version of Cat from All Quiet on the Western Front.
Right. I don't think that this film presents him as the villain either. I think it's more just he is what he is.
Yes. He's that very like based type character where it's like, all right, you know what? Like I'm here. I'm going to be however I want to be, but I also accept the situation that I'm in, and I'm going to do. It's not, he's not like this completely like corrupt person necessarily, but there is you see why people gravitate towards him. Yeah, but he also has a charisma to him. It's not like he's just like the hard ass like bull type character you see in a lot of prison movies. One of the characters that I did resonate very well with was Kent, and I don't completely agree with you, Clay. And the idea is with him is more so that it shows the corruption. I think that there it can be argued that there is a lot of cowardice that's initially with him from the outset.
I was about to say, but I think that him being put in this situation, I think the film is arguing that he never should have been put in this situation because that brings it out of
it. Exacerbates it, and I would agree with that. I think of all the villainous characters we've covered in a lot of our movies, I think he's up there for me as one of the more deplorable ones of the ones we've seen, because again, it's similar to what we talked about earlier with the character with the Harvester from City Girl. He does do a lot to manipulate the situation, and it all constantly is for his own personal gain. He's informing people. He's also telling people certain things to kind of keep the action going, but it's all for his own benefit.
Sorry, they really want you to despise his level of cowardice.
Yes, I agree. I think the reasoning behind a lot of what he does against the Morgan character is primarily driven, we're to assume, from his sister. I don't think the movie does a great job of showcasing that that's what's motivating him to work against Morgan so much as just putting together the idea that maybe it's just because he doesn't want him near his sister, because he does act offensive a couple times, but it doesn't seem like they have like the type of closeness to where it's a do or die sort of situation for him, which is where I kind of...
We only see him interact with the sister once. I mean, we see him bring in the picture, but that's it. Yeah.
So you have like a lot of these character archetypes and plot points that are very dissimilar from prison films that we associate and are familiar with today. And I think that's where the movie is interesting to me. But like I said, I think the way that it's ultimately executed, especially with some of the pacing stuff towards the middle, once Morgan gets out for that brief time, like the romance, for example, like it's nothing to me. It's just, there wasn't anything there. Like a lot of what
I felt pleasant towards the fact that he found happiness outside of prison. but I didn't really care about that relationship.
And that's what I mean by the concept, the idea of him finding that sort of solace. But when you have much of their relationship being built on off-screen, which is an uncommon, of course, with films, you have your montages or you have your time skips where it's like, yeah, they're a better couple. But with them, I don't think the film did the work that it needed to make us necessarily root for them as a couple. You can root for Morgan's freedom and his exoneration in some capacity because what brings him back to prison is not his fault, ultimately. But yeah, as far as like her being his motivation for being out, I don't buy it. Aside from him just being attracted to her and presumably she to him, it doesn't work for me. So that's my 2 cents, I guess, in the movie.
Okay, Hannah.
So for the second episode in a row, the one that the Oscars selected is my least favorite of the bunch. And for similar reasons. I just am not invested in this story for the most part. Mm-hmm. I think it's interesting that this was an early prison movie. I think it's interesting that it came out of a series of articles about issues in the prison system. So it was almost like it was very much intended to be a social movie exploring actual social issues right now, which I think is really interesting. But I just didn't connect with it. The one thing that I did love is this was, as we talk about all the different actors that we've seen crossing over, that's been interesting throughout my whole project as well. This was the third film that I'd seen Wallace Beery in from this year.
Oh, wow.
Out of it, he's got apparently 2 more, which I'll have to see. And he's the kind of actor who, like, watching this, you would absolutely think that he just only got cast as the heavy tough in all of them. But the other 2 that he's in, the other 2 he's in from 1930 is in one he plays sort of like a good-hearted drunken fisherman. And in one he plays the law enforcement, sort of the tough cop. And so I loved, this was the third one that I'd seen from him. And I think by far the most interesting performance. I was interested in his story. He is a sort of interesting mix of jovial and ominous in a really interesting way. And I found him interesting and the way that he interacted with people around him to be the most compelling thing about the movie. And the rest of it, I appreciate what it was doing. I just didn't have a lot of interest in the way that the story was told. And I've realized lately, like, I think part of my difficulty with both prison movies and war movies is that I have a little bit of face blindness. And when you put a whole bunch of people, especially in the 1930s, when they were all people of the same race, all together in the same outfits,
a bunch of white guys, all
I am
in the same
not going to be able to
uniforms.
tell who is who unless I have seen them in 2 other movies from 1930. So that's probably why I liked Wallace Beery the best. But but it does make it harder for me to connect to the characters and to root for them because I'm spending my whole time, trying to figure out who is who. And so that's a thing on my part. But yeah, it was fine. I think it was a good one I've enjoyed watching firsts and realizing this is where, so many of these tropes kind of evolved from and how kind of Jack was talking about how this is different from the way that the tropes have kind of landed, but seeing how some of these kind of seeing where they came out of and the first iteration of these stories and how we first decided to tell a prison story. And this is how we're going to structure it. And these are the kinds of characters we're going to put in it. It was an interesting historical thing for me, but not as much of an interesting story for myself. So I don't have a lot else to say about it. It was my divorcee where I was just like, it's probably fine. I just don't care.
It's probably fine.
I felt more or less the same. Like I said, the only reason I put this above Blue Angel on my list was just because I felt like Blue Angel was an incomplete experience for me, and so I couldn't do that. But yeah, this was I've been more or less the bottom of my list as far as those other viewings. I will give one more point of praise, I guess, before I say my piece. I did appreciate how visceral the violence was in this movie, similarly to Hell's Angels, and positively compared to something like The Unholy Three. I felt like there were moments during this movie, as well as Hell's Angels, where I'm like, oh my god, they actually showed that. Like when people die in this movie, like there's like these grief-stricken, horrific screams that you just hear, and that stuck with me. Again, compared to previous films we watched for this podcast, it just, again, we talk about the idea of pre-code. We haven't really talked about how much it pushes the boundary with this particular set of movies compared to previous episodes. But I think that's maybe arguably, aside from like some of the more revealing outfits of the other films we've talked about today, I think it's probably one of those instances where it's like, yeah, just how violent things were in this was probably the most indicative of pre-code for movies like this.
Yeah. No, that's a good thought.
Yeah. All right. I will say, I think, Jack, you mentioned it a little bit there, but I really found Robert Montgomery as Kent a fascinating performance to watch. I think that like, while like I said, I enjoyed Wallace Beery's performance, and I liked Chester Morris in this more than The Divorcee. To me, the most interesting performance was Robert Montgomery as Kent.
He's a worm.
Yeah, and he believably so. Like, you look at his face and you're like, that guy's terrified.
Yeah.
That guy is like just 100% does not care about anything but saving his own skin.
Kind of like a Percy from your Green Mile.
Yeah. Yeah. Like it's really like, yeah, like it's an insidious selfishness.
Yeah.
Kind of.
And an unpowerful one. Like an admittedly, self-admittedly unpowerful one.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, then I think that we're pretty much done then with the discussion. So let us go ahead and let's just kind of recap our lists. So mine, I put City Girl as my number one. I had a switch during the discussion, and The Blue Angel is my number two. Big House is my number three. Number four is Madam Satan, and my number five was Hell's Angels.
Mine was starting with City Girl, going to Hell's Angels, then to Madame Shaitan, The Big House, and then ending with The Blue Angel for aforementioned reasons.
Yeah. And then I had City Girl at the top of the list, then Blue Angel, then Madam Satan, then Hell's Angels, then The Big House.
All right. And so that means we all chose City Girl as our number one. So City Girl is our number one film for this group. Followed, I believe, does that tie?
We had a tie between Madam Satan and Blue Angel for our second place.
Yeah. Which, pending a rewatch from Jack, obviously it doesn't matter for this episode, but it might end up in a much different place when we rank all of these. And then Hell's Angels was after that, and Big House pulling up the rear.
I helped tank it. I guess this time was Jack too. But
yeah, I was about to say, it started off as my number two, and then I even put it down lower. So yeah, it was just as we were talking, I was like, yeah, no, like Blue Angel is one of the ones that sticks with me the most. And the more that I look back on it, I am less compelled by the Big House.
My initial ranking before I even posted, I changed it just slightly before I've shared it with you folks earlier today, is Madam Satan was my number two and Blue Angel was my number three. And then as I thought about it, I was like, no, I think Blue Angel, like rewatching it, that ending like hit me hard.
And honestly, even before my rewatch, I realized that it was kind of sticking with me. And I was like,
so we'll have to I have faith that rewatch is gonna jump it up in Jack's rankings, but maybe it will push it further down than ever. Who knows?
Who knows? He's like, it sucks. It's the worst.
They can't even speak English.
Enjoy the German. But yeah, so now we want to go ahead and give everyone the opportunity to get into contact with us. Of course, you can contact me on, I'm still saying Twitter and Instagram at The Flying Cow Pod. You can email at theflyingcowpod@gmail.com. You can also, make sure to check out all of the other shows that we've got going, our Disney podcast discussions and everything else. Don't forget to check out the patreon.com/theflyingcow. Where I believe, yes, this month we probably have already debuted a few episodes of our new Patreon exclusive show, Comets and Cabbages, our rewatch and recap of Avatar: The Last Airbender. So make sure to check that out. Let's see. Jack, Hannah, you guys have anything you want people to know about?
I'll plug the same thing I always plug, my podcast, Somebody Write This, still coming out. Yeah, you can find us wherever we have podcasts. And then just because I just finished it, it was phenomenal. And nobody talks about it. If you haven't seen the TV show, The Other Two, you should. It just finished its 3rd season. I think it's final season. It's absolutely hilarious and a wonderful satire of the entertainment industry, and very sharp and very funny. And Molly Shannon is in it, and it's good stuff. So if you haven't watched it, that's my big recommendation to people right now. More people need to watch The Other Two.
Where is it streaming?
HBO Max.
Cool. Oh, good to know.
Or
really
Max. I will say, sorry, I'm just remembering that this is coming out in August, not September. So Comets and Cabbages is not out yet, but it will be. Remember to check out the last episode and go back and listen to all of the episodes of Around the World, our Ernest podcast. So,
my podcast's still going.
Yeah.
As far as me, like I said, Loki season 2 is coming out soon. Looking forward to that. We got
in October, right?
Yeah, I think so. Is that,
say that's the date I saw recently. So I
saw the
true.
poster. I saw the poster. I was like, yee. Yeah, look for me, Soft Loki. I also got. I'm not going to announce it yet, but I got an audiobook coming out later this year. I'll plug that on like either the next episode or a future episode if I'm brought back on. Got 2 big projects I'm working on. Can't say anything yet, but ideally one of them will be out by September. Very excited about it. If you like movie stuff with me, then hopefully it'll be good news for you. We'll see. And I guess to plug something like Hannah did, there's a documentary on HBO Max that I watched recently. I watched it because there's a guy that I worked with for years at a previous job of mine at a gym I used to work at years ago. And his name is George Anthony Morton. And he is an incredible artist with a crazy background. And they actually made a documentary about him. And it's on HBO Max. It's called Master of Light. Blew my mind when I saw it because, yeah, like I've followed his journey a little bit here and there since, since he went to study at the academies. But crazy talented painter, again, rough background, but he's got a great story to tell. So if you like that sort of storyline, then check it out. It's called Master of Light on HBO Max. I want to give him all the support I can because he's a good guy.
And I'm not going to plug anything, but I will say if it's still going on, which the way it's been dragging on, it might be, support the writers and actors strike because they're not asking for crazy things and the producers aren't even listening to them. It's ridiculous.
I'm hearing watching things on streaming is a good way to support them because part of the thing is that they're saying that streaming is not feasible. So go watch the other two.
The actors themselves are not allowed to plug their own projects, but we are. We support them. Yes.
Yeah. So go watch as much as you can on streaming. Watch the shows you support on streaming. Let the studios know that streaming deserves to have the same residuals as everything else.
Agreed. And also that we prefer real actors in our stuff and not computer images.
Yeah. Can you imagine me, an AI representation of my voice without the ums or uhs? That'd be horrible.
All right. Well, like I said, we will be back next time with actually the awards. The Teddy Awards, the second, not annual, I guess it was
isn't it? So far, I feel like it's been.
We didn't do it last year.
Did we not? Oh,
we did it 2 years ago.
How time flies.
Yeah, we did it in 2021.
Yeah.
We skipped 2022. But it is the second Teddy Awards for 1930. So make sure to check that out when it comes out. It'll be a lot of fun. But until then, moo.
Mm.